So, without further ado, getting the team's buy-in, strategies for HubSpot user adoption. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Dan Jenkins. I'm going to be hosting this session. I'm the commercial director here at Wagada Digital. I'm a big LinkedIner, so don't be afraid to get connected with me on LinkedIn. It'd be good to take the conversation forward on there, or if you have any questions after the session. But yeah, it's not all about me. I'm part of a team of around 26 specialists across 3 locations in London, St Albans and Cheltenham. We are a full service award-winning digital marketing agency. So we offer 4 core services: digital marketing, employer branding, website development, and we are platinum HubSpot partners as well. I think there's a little bit more information on the next slide, but ultimately we've amassed a wealth of knowledge and expertise across a wide range of industries. So we work with B2B, we work with B2C. If you've got any questions after this session, not only about HubSpot, but about other digital marketing, web development, or employer branding services, don't hesitate to reach out, give me a shout. And just finally, before I hand over to Beck, something that we've extended through popular engagement is our spot check. Something that we're able to offer to you. It's a completely no pressure, free of charge service, whereby if you are using HubSpot, we can get in there, we can have a look, we can give you a little bit of an action plan about how you could be using it differently, how you could be getting a little bit more out of it. Again, the QR code is there, but I'll make sure we send the link in the follow-up, so you can just fill out a form and get yourself registered for spot check, and Bex and the team will get in there and help you take your HubSpot usage to the next level. Fab. So over to you, Bex.
Thank you, Daniel. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining today. As Dan said, I'm Bex. I head up our HubSpot team here at Wagada, so we help clients with their HubSpot implementations, their optimizations and training. I've been here 4 years now, and I used HubSpot in my previous roles as well. So I've seen my fair share of rollouts of the HubSpot system and the good, the bad and the ugly of user adoption. So hopefully I'm going to share some of those hints, tips and learned experiences with you today. Before we jump in, I will say that this session focuses a lot on how to get buy-in from the start of an implementation project. But if you are already using HubSpot and you're struggling with user adoption, the tips today will still definitely be of use to you and can be implemented wherever you are on your journey. So what we're going to cover today, firstly, I'll look at why user adoption is so important and the impact poor adoption can have on your business. We'll go through some of the common reasons CRMs are not embraced by teams and the pitfalls that you can have. We'll look at how to work with your teams and get end users on board before you start to implement. We'll look at how to organise and run training at the point of rollout so that everyone starts using the platform immediately and successfully. And we'll look at the long term and how to ensure the novelty doesn't wear off and people stay engaged over time so that you can continually improve your CRM and the ROI that you're getting from it. Okay, so make or break time. User adoption can make or break your CRM, and it might be a bold statement that it's the most important part of your journey, but it's certainly one of the most common reasons that transitions are unsuccessful in meeting the goals of the business and the efficiency and ROI expectations that they have. Multiple research studies over a couple of decades now have shown that anywhere between 20% and 70% of all implementations fail in this regard, and a lot of that is due to poor user adoption. So let's have a look at some of the consequences for your business if this was to happen to you. So firstly, we all know that CRMs are a big investment. Deciding to implement your CRM, change your platform, or even just adjust the way that you use your current platform is a major business decision. And it's not just about the cost of the software, it's about your total cost of ownership. So what does it actually cost to own your CRM? Obviously, the software subscriptions are going to be a big factor. If you're looking at marketing and sales hub in HubSpot, for example, you should expect your software costs to range from somewhere from a few hundred to a couple of £1,000s a month. And that's going to be higher if you've got a big business and you need more seats, or if you need some of the more enterprise features that HubSpot offers. So that's a big, significant investment. But as well as these, you need to think about your onboarding and your ongoing costs. Getting your platform onboarded and customized to the way that's going to work for you is going to be an investment as well. If you've got integration or integrations that you need to put in or data that you need to migrate, there may be an investment needed there to do that smoothly. Of course, you've got training at the point of launch, but also in the future. You've got ongoing support and maintenance of the CRM platform and support from HubSpot partners like ourselves to improve and update features as they come in. And of course, then you've got to think about the people, the resources it's going to take for all of those things. And all of that adds up. Now, when it's done right, CRMs can generate a great ROI. Generally, the research shows that it can be between 8 and 10% of that total cost of ownership. So it can pay for itself over and over again, but only if people are using it. If the CRM isn't embraced and used by the team, it can just be a huge drain on finance and resource. The next big effect that a poor implementation and poor user adoption can have is on customer relationships. One of the biggest reasons businesses want a CRM in the first place is to manage their customer relationships and bring transparency across their teams. HubSpot's mantra is single source of truth, and that means collating every piece of data you have on a contact or client, segmenting it into marketable audiences, tracking sales cycles, managing customer interactions. It's all in one place. So that's only going to work if all the teams are on board in entering, managing, and using data in a way that works for everybody across the business. If not, your data is going to degrade, and you might even end up with poorer insight than you had in the first place. And that's going to mean that your customer interactions are going to become less meaningful. In the worst scenarios, and I've seen this happen, it can actively damage your customer relationships because you will start to get irrelevant, badly timed, or misinformed communications going out. And that's going to affect the trust that people put in your business. It can cause missed opportunities for upsells, advocacy, and referrals. So again, customer relationships are a major reason to make sure that your user adoption is on point. And finally, in this section, it's not just customer relationships that poor user adoption can affect. It can also affect the team morale. So partial adoption of a system without everyone being on board and everyone on the same page can cause disruption and a breakdown in internal teams. I've heard managers say at the point of rollout, and I've been in teams where my manager has said this to me, CRM's in from now. If it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen. It's a great long-term goal to have, and that's where we should all be. But if you put that forward at the start of a project and in the early stages without proper understanding, training, and support for the team, it can make those that are struggling to adapt even more resistant, and those that have embraced it resentful because they're playing by the rules when other people aren't. So marketing teams can get frustrated that their segmentation isn't defined or their campaigns aren't efficient. You've got sales teams that can't effectively manage their pipelines and tend to feel disjointed. Customer service teams will scrabble to be able to answer queries because they don't have the information to hand. And all that is going to lead to friction amongst the team. In this scenario, you do sometimes find that those who initially embraced the change in the system will give up at this point, because if they're doing it and the rest of the team aren't, what's the point? So they'll revert to old and even worse practice than before. So now that we understand some of the risks, we're going to have a look at some common mistakes businesses can make and why poor user adoption can happen. Firstly, the migration of data and the integration isn't robust enough at the time of build. Your CRMs are unlikely to be replacing all of your software. So your social platforms, ERPs, finance platforms, data insight platforms, for example, they're probably all going to stay and going to need to be integrated. And if you haven't had a CRM or a strict data collection process in the past, I guarantee you that everyone's got their own spreadsheet. They've all got their own files, they've got notes in notebooks, they've got in their head systems, and all of that is valuable information that you're going to want in your CRM. Once implemented, if people can't find this information in their CRM or they struggle with navigating between platforms and they find it clunky, again, they're going to revert back to their old ways. And this tends to happen if those involved in the planning stages don't have a full understanding of current tech stacks within the business, where data is held, or how it's collected by the team. For this reason, it's really important before building out the new system to really dig into each of the team's current processes and how they use other software, and make sure that everything is brought over at the time of the build. Secondly, the over-customization of a platform can be totally overwhelming when it's first introduced. This could include anything from convoluted automations that move and change things with no real benefit to the process or to the business, excessive internal reminders or blockers put in place by unnecessary mandatory fields. So things like moving through the pipeline is stopped by certain fields needing to be filled in. And simple processes being segmented into multiple pipelines and different objects simply because the functionality is there to do so in HubSpot. Again, I see this a lot with onboarding, where people get very excited by what HubSpot can do, so they do everything all at once. But too much change at once is going to leave your users feeling frazzled. Again, they'll give up eventually. Bringing in a new CRM is the perfect chance to change your processes, but you need to get people on board first, then iteratively add and enhance more features as you go along. A quick one, and conversely to my last point, the system's not personalized enough. So this isn't about customization of the features, but more of the interface. If people don't see the system working for them, then they'll disengage with it. So it's really important to make sure that each team has a set of views, presets, team customized record cards to make the experience more seamless and aid adoption for individuals. Lack of executive engagement when rolling out a CRM is a big part of why adoptions fail. It's back to that beating people into compliance rather than leading the charge. If leaders aren't bought in, engaged and enthusiastic about the why of the project, not just the how, then your team's not going to be either. It seems really obvious, but teams look to their managers and the leadership team for guidance, context and support. So those at the top are going to be responsible for ensuring that all elements of the platform work for everyone and for explaining why the change is beneficial for everyone involved. You really can't expect your teams to buy in to a system or a set of processes without top-down engagement. And
just on that, Beck, sorry, I've just had a personal message come through. So I just wanted to interrupt with that, if that's okay. It was just a question regarding selling up and kind of selling HubSpot up, and any guidance in terms of internal, because obviously when you think about it as well, I guess across teams, you've got different levels of engagement, different needs. You've got marketing departments, marketing managers that want a CRM for one thing. You've got perhaps a sales team that are looking to get something different out of it. But any thoughts in terms of how to communicate internally? The question's about selling up, but I guess as well about selling across and colleagues, and I guess sales to marketing, marketing to sales, as well as to an executive board or what have you. Any thoughts or guidance on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think I talk about this just coming onto it in the how you get engagement through across teams, but very much it's about making sure that those important people and those essential people, part of those teams, are all involved in the process, and there's an opportunity for everyone to speak and get involved and put their thoughts forward. I think particularly with HubSpot, if teams are going to be passing off to each other, marketing to sales, for example, getting everybody at the beginning and how that process will work is going to be what buys everybody into it.
Yeah, and I guess tapping into those pain points as well then, right? Like really and being empathetic and understanding the needs of each department, so that you make sure that you're building a case, a business case that completely integrates all these different challenges, whether it's about, you know, visibility and transparency at executive level, or if it's about, yeah, you know, lead generation and leads, you know, well, you name it, but it's about just tapping into those different pain points and building a consolidated business case. Yeah,
exactly. And I think just on this executive engagement thing, that includes being open to being sold up to. I think, you know, yes, you can work from top down, but you have to be engaged with what people are telling you from the bottom, because they are going to know their jobs and the business better than you are. Just quickly, because we'll talk about training a little bit later on, but obviously inadequate training is going to damage or cause any kind of change not to be successful. We see this most often. This is the most common reason that I see for adoption not happening. And it's when implementations go awry because those involved in the implementing have got a broad understanding of the platform as a whole and how it should work, but that's not how they train the team. A lack of personalized training focusing on how each person uses the system will cause them not to use it. We'll move on to training a little bit more in a second. And finally, not addressing an individual or group's resistance to change can be a huge factor as well. And it's probably the biggest and most difficult to overcome because everyone's got their own reasons for resisting a change. If it's handled with care, a little bit of psychological strategy, it is possible to overcome, but you need to address it early on in the process. Okay. Start talking about risk and what can go wrong. Let's start looking at how we can avoid these pitfalls and how we can start to get users brought in from the start of the project. So as Dan and I just talked about, and how what I've mentioned quite a lot is how the people building and bringing in the CRM are not necessarily understanding the needs of all the end users. That's why we always recommend that at the beginning of a project, you get input from across the business and all of those teams, as we were saying, that are going to be infected by the change. So I think this is back to kind of
this is perfect as well, Bex. Just on this, I've had a private question come through. Is it best to include those that you know will be resistant to a new system in the early scoping workshop? So you're probably going to touch on that in a bit more depth, but let's talk about, who's involved, the enthusiasts versus the barriers.
Yeah, annoyingly, those people definitely need to be involved. So who should you involve in your project? You're going to have your top level team, your project sponsors, your champions, the implementation team that are invested in paying for the platform, business change, and the technical aspects. But then these other people are going to need to be brought in as well. So your team managers need to be brought in early on, and the challenges, the goals, and the wants and needs they have for improving processes and performances within their individual teams. Then bring in those experienced, influential, and dynamic team members, again, from each team. Those that have been working in the current systems for the longest will have the most knowledge on what the day-to-day really looks like, what needs improving, and where everything is. That's the most important thing. They know where your data is. But it's also to involve some fresh blood, so those that are more open to new ideas and less resistant to change, and those in the team that have the most sway with others, because if you can get those brought in, then they're going to bring other people along with them. And to your point, don't ignore those more resistant or difficult team members. It's definitely easier in the short term to just say, no, it's fine, we'll bring them on later. But if you get them involved in the planning, they'll be much, much more likely to accept the change because they're going to feel like they helped to bring it about. So let's have a look at how some of those blockers, how to identify them, and who they might be within your business. So I can't take credit for this slide. It comes from a book with a slightly naughty name and a slightly offensive name to the chapter of this. So I'm not going to share the book with you, but it's by an author called Michael Ludlow, if you do want to look it up.
And it's about CRM, right, Bex? It's literally about CRM, isn't
it? It's about how to implement CRMs, definitely.
Yeah.
It's relevant.
Michael Ludlow, right, yeah.
Have a look it up. So these are the 5 types of resistant people that I see most often when I'm doing implementations. Michael Ludlow actually has about 12 of them. And if you're part of a small business, you might already think of some names that come to mind when you look at these different types of traits. It's important to remember that just because people have these traits, it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that they're the people that you need to get on side as early as possible.
Very tactful, Bex. Very tactful.
Everyone's different, right? And everyone's got their reason for resisting change. It's about understanding what those reasons are. I'll run through these very quickly. The one I see most often is the resistant traditionalist. I hate to say it, these people are usually in sales teams. And they tend to think that everything's fine and a new system is just another admin task that won't change anything. So these are the kind of people that you need to convince it's going to make a difference to them. Your overwhelmed skeptics are generally, not always, but generally have a lot on the go. Think marketing executives, so not managers, those people that are doing lots of things day to day. They're having to adopt new platforms all the time, new technologies. And And so they can be jaded through no fault of their own. They tend to be quite vocal about it as well. So bringing them on board early means that you won't get that kind of, don't want to use the word toxicity, but I'm going to, across the rest of the team. Your passive aggressive non-users, hopefully there aren't too many of these about, but they'll openly agree to change, say they're going to do it and then don't. They'll have a lot of sway with others in this particular group because they'll be the ones to find workarounds to processes. Your misaligned managers are pure of heart. They really want to make the implementation work. They really want people to adopt, but they put the focus on their team's priorities rather than the whole business. So they need to understand the bigger picture. And the procrastinator, back to being tactful, these people are not lazy, but they do have a fear of change if they think it's going to call them out. So these need to be motivated to adapt to something new. And these are the people that will be last on board if you don't get them early. So they'll be your chink in the armor. Cool. I'm really conscious of time, but just a little bit about how you get people on board. Do it in stages. Implementing a CRM is a big undertaking already, so make sure you gather the information you need and everyone feels listened to without delaying your timelines. Work with your managers first to understand their concerns and goals for the project, then get others involved at the onboarding stage, workshop with them to understand their processes. If you're working with an onboarding partner agency like Wagada Digital, they might offer this as standard, but if they don't, do ask for it. It's a really important step. Document your findings and devise your build plan to address the priorities of each team as part of the first stage rollout. And continue to keep people involved throughout the process. Communicate progress, involve them at relevant testing, and get them to QA the system with you. They're the ones that are going to be using it. One caveat. Implementing a CRM is a business decision and it needs to be driven by the company as a whole. So do listen to everybody's needs, communicate with context, but please don't fall into the trap of designing a platform by committee. That will make your implementation last forever, basically. Everyone's got opinions. Those making the final decisions on directing the build and how the CRM will be used should lay with the leadership team responsible for its success. Okay. So your CRM's customized, new processes agreed, you're ready to roll out. And how do you make sure your training is going to get everyone ready and willing? As I said, buy-in needs to come from the top down. So it's important your leadership team are trained before everybody else. They don't need to know the ins and outs of how everybody will use the system, but they do need to understand what's going to be happening and why. A session with the leadership team should give an overview of the platform and is a chance to ensure they all understand the reasoning behind what's being implemented so that they can successfully champion it. And before you move into individual team trainings, it's sometimes helpful to hold an all-hands session to introduce the rollout across the business. These sessions are best led by senior leadership or management to show engagement and understanding and to really sell the benefits overall. It's your chance here to get your teams to understand how, with HubSpot, they'll be more connected to each other and as the business overall. Keep this session top level, get people excited by what they're going to be able to achieve. But do be real, acknowledge that there may be apprehension or concerns, address them in the room. If something comes out you hadn't thought about, take a step back and think about implementing it now. And explain the long-term plan to help people adopt new ways of working. Try to allay those concerns and that apprehension at this point. And the most important form of training is the sessions for the individual teams. Break it down into user groups or those with similar roles or functions where their processes overlap. This is what we were talking about before. You might want to do a session with sales and marketing to discuss that handover piece. Focus here should be a mix of how and why. People need to be trained on exactly how to use the system, the click here, do that, but also on the outcomes and benefits for them and for the business.
Just on that, I think, and Bex, we'll take it, don't rush, we'll take it a little bit after 5:30. I'll make sure everybody gets the recordings if anybody does need to duck out, but we've had a couple of questions and there's a couple more, so we'll take it beyond the 5:30. But I think that second point is key, right? So what I find really interesting, and working within HubSpot myself, daily, hourly, minutely, and with the team, is is making sure as well that individuals know how to get the most out of it for themselves, because you can view things differently, you can engage with things differently, you build in team-wide or company-wide processes, but it's actually about having the sensitivity to go, okay, what does Jane in sales or Steve in sales, what do they need to get out of it? What does John in marketing need to get out of it? How can we make sure that we're training this team in a way that means that individuals are using it slightly differently, but still following perhaps the guiding principles that are being set out about how the CRM is adopted, right? And I think that taking too much of a blanket or a one size fits all approach is what's going to lead to that reticence, because people go, oh, well, I can't work that way. I have my notebook, but then you go, yeah, but did you know you could do it like this? And then you start to teach individuals how to adopt ways of working, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's back to what I was saying about not personalizing the system enough at the point of the build. It's got to work for individuals. Nobody's going to buy into a system if they don't understand what's in it for them. We might all be very company focused, and yes, we're bought into the vision. Ultimately, what we want is a system that works for us and makes our day-to-day easier. So it's important to build the system in that way and to train it in that way. Nobody wants to sit in a 4-hour training session understanding how somebody in a completely different team is going to use HubSpot.
So on that, I've had a private question come through. Should this training be driven by the HubSpot Academy, or should we create our own training sessions? In the past, this brand has relied on the HubSpot Academy, but wonders if a more personal approach or a different approach, or is a balance of using the Academy to cover certain areas and then finding other internal ways. What's your
Yeah.
thoughts on the best way to, because obviously you can work with brands like us as well and partners, but what does the picture look like in terms of training? Because there's so much opportunity.
So I think this very much comes on to my next point. You do have to think about people's learning styles. What works for your team? Because everybody works differently. Some people will be perfectly happy to work their way through the HubSpot Academy courses, and that works for them. They learn in silo. Other people might like group sessions or podcasts. There's so many different ways of learning. So understand, even ask them what they want. Literally get it from them. And sometimes, particularly at the beginning, it is much better to get it facilitated by a partner, an expert, somebody external, who understands the business, understands the processes you've got in place, but is impartial. So they're not going to be jaded or influenced by any other feelings about what should happen within the CRM. Does that answer your question? Or I don't know whose question it was, but thank you. Cool. So this is actually, again, back to that question. Early stage resources and support are going to be needed. Nobody's going to come out of your first training session and be able to use the system 100%. So first few days, weeks and months, make sure that you have those resources in place. As we said, you've got the HubSpot Academy, you've got the Knowledge Hub. There are loads of YouTube videos out there. Some training partners, this is what we do, but after the initial training, we will provide a repository of kind of refresher videos. So that sort of thing all helps in those first few vital weeks to encourage self-learning and engagement. You do need to be prepared at this stage as well for those team members that are finding it hard to adapt. They might need more regular check-ins. If you've got a HubSpot champion internally, set them up once a week with them to have that check-in and find out what's going on with them. And do factor into your plan that you might need to add in additional training, again, from an outside source, or set something up internally, and add that into your plan early on, because you are likely going to need it, if not for the whole team, at least for some of them. And then reviewing the adoption and following up. Usually kind of after the first month, first 6 weeks is a good time to do this. But it's really important for ongoing adoption that you continue to review what's happening. So first few weeks, set some metrics that you're going to use to track the adoption. It could be number of campaigns created, activity goals, ticket completion. Whatever it is, make it meaningful for your business. And then follow up with the team, give them your findings and listen. Again, keep listening to their experiences so far. What you do after this first adoption review is going to depend on what's happened during those first months, 6 weeks. But you might decide that you want to set more goals and review again in another 6 weeks. You might decide that now's the time to implement more training. You might even decide that it's gone really, really well, and you can start to implement some of those other features and customizations that we didn't want to do right at the beginning. Okay, and just finally, how do we maintain usage over time? So once that novelty's worn off or the team changes, how do we keep that engagement going and ensure continual and improved usage and ROI? And it's all about making the change stick. So over time, your internal team is going to change and grow. So you need to make CRM training part of your company onboarding process. Dedicated training sessions, just as you did when you rolled it out. Again, over time, these can be facilitated by the in-house team. There can be a video series, or again, you can bring in somebody from outside to rerun the sessions. That's entirely up to you, your resources, and what you have available. Provide continual means of support for those struggling. Encourage honest and open feedback, and provide the same in return. This is what we were saying about selling up. Make sure you are continually listening and giving feedback. Again, you can do that through a house champion or through a partner agency. Use HubSpot tools to aid adoption and learning. So we talked about those previously. Make it part of your ongoing CPD plans. And can communicate your successes. Communicate business success brought about by the CRM, but also team successes, individual successes, and the changes everybody is seeing because this process has just got better.
Just on that, Bex, I think it's worth, genuinely, I'm just thinking as we go, it's probably worth us doing a whole session on how to calculate and communicate the return on investment, because I think that's what's key, right? Because with any investment business go, especially now in 2025, senior stakeholders will say, well, hang on a minute, money out, money in. What difference is this going to make to my bottom line? So ways to identify and communicate that the ROI is absolutely there, whether it comes through efficiency and increased output, which leads to lead generation or higher levels of engagement, your close rate increased by 10%, whatever, all these things. But I actually think that putting that together and being able to communicate that internally is a real challenge, but is really important to get team buy-in, especially at the senior level.
Yeah, I agree. Even things like staff retention, if processes are better and your jobs are easier, your staff retention's better, that reduces your recruitment and training costs. It really does go to all levels of the business, this. But yes, I absolutely could have talked for hours on this subject. It has been a little bit of a whirlwind tour, but hopefully it's given you some good food for thought, some ideas and some ways that you can implement this within your businesses. Just a quick one on what actually happens when you do this right. This is just a testimonial here from somebody that we helped onboard HubSpot and get her team to adopt it. So they found it had a huge benefit for their entire company, basically, and across teams, across marketing, sales, and service as well. Finally, before I hand you back to Dan, some key takeaways. And I think we've reiterated all of this as we've gone through, but designing and developing a killer CRM is absolutely useless if nobody uses it, and it could cost you more than your initial investment. Common pitfalls can be easily avoided. It just needs careful planning and a better understanding of your teams. Always, always make your teams part of the process. They know their jobs much better than you do. Let everybody know the big picture, but train them individually. Think about what they need to know and how you are going to provide that knowledge. And lead from the front. Engage, have success metrics and communicate them. And encourage continual learning and feedback. And I am over time, but hopefully that was all good for everybody.
Brilliant.
I'm going to hand back to you. Thank you.
Cheers, Bex. Thank you so much. I've had some lovely private messages. Somebody come through as well and say, please do an ROI presentation. So absolutely, we'll get that booked in. We're about to launch a number of webinars over the coming weeks, but we will make sure that is one of them in terms of both identifying and then communicating return on investment. I've popped a link in the group chat as well on maximizing your website's potential, powerful design and branding strategies for 2025. I'm going to be heading up a webinar on Thursday alongside my colleague Prue. And we're going to be looking at kind of website trends in 2025, key considerations. We're going to showcase what some big brands are doing in terms of brand identity and those kind of changes over the last couple of years and how we can take that forward into 2025. So if you're thinking about a new website redesign or just a bit of a refresh to your online look and feel or how you position yourselves as a brand, There's going to be loads of insight in that hour. I'm really excited by it. And it's actually a very popular one. We've got a very large number registered for that. So I've popped the link in the chat. Don't hesitate to get in to get yourselves on there, find out a little bit more and get yourself booked on. And I will be seeing you again on Thursday. Also, if you can't make the time, register anyway, because a little secret, you'll get the deck, you'll get the recording, you'll have all that lovely content to share on your lunch and learn with the team. So more nice messages, loads to think about, very insightful. Please do an ROI presentation. Absolutely. I'll be getting it in the diary. But in the meantime, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day. Best of luck with your HubSpot journey. If you need anything, you know where to find us. But on behalf of Bex, I and the whole team at Wagada, have a great week. And when it finally comes around, enjoy your weekend. Cheers, everybody. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Bye-bye.